Hi, my name is Deb Crane. I am a member of the Jewish Climate Action Network of Massachusetts, and I am part of our soil carbon team. Last time we talked about why we want to do this program, this great program, Sacred Grounds, which is part of the National Wildlife Federation. Today, we are going to talk about the how. I will put in the chat our brand new Google group where we can talk about carbon farming, regenerative agriculture, native plants, and all things related to that. So please, during this session or at the end, join us up. With that, I am going to turn this over to Rabbi Katie Allen.
Hi, thank you, Deb, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I am the president and founder of the Jewish Climate Action Network in Massachusetts, and just really thrilled for all of the presenters that we have with us today, including, just each and every one of you are going to bring special things to it. So thank you for putting this together, Deb, and I'm looking forward to a wonderful evening, and thank you all for joining us, and I hope you enjoy this great presentation.
Great. So we actually, part of why our schedule is so jammed up is that we have a last minute special guest, director Catherine Zimmerman, director and producer Catherine Zimmerman. And the reason why she is so near and dear to our heart for this program is that she is basically the person who inspired our team and our organization to pursue working with the Sacred Grounds program. Her film, Hometown Habitat, we cannot recommend it enough. If you have not already seen it, please do. But let me turn it over to Catherine so she can talk a little bit more about it and about her journey.
Hi, everyone. I'm really thrilled to be here. And I'm so glad that the film has really created this kind of call to action. That was what was behind the film. All the stories that we tell in the film are pieces of what native plants can do for our communities. And in particular, I've always felt that congregations are a huge part of how we can spread this message. There are people from different walks of life. They have their faith in common, but they're from all over, different income, different walks of life. And so we can inspire those people at church, at congregations, and they can take it home into their neighborhoods, be ambassadors. So it was fun. Naomi Edelson's synagogue was the first place we went to look at this, to see if we wanted to even do this segment. And the rabbi just blew me away right off the bat with his description of how pollinators and birds could have breakfast at the mosque and lunch at the Gurdwara and 4 p.m. tea at the temple and dinner at the church. And I thought that was such a lovely way to put it together, that we're creating these islands and these connections between areas so that wildlife does have a path, does have a way to feed itself, to reproduce, to do all these things. And it gives me goosebumps just thinking about it. And I remember saying to my sound man when we filmed that very first utterance out of the rabbi's mouth, I said, "They're in, we're doing this one." And so one of the things, as I traveled around the country with Rick, my sound guy, I realized when I was editing the film that the reason, and it wasn't something I even thought of before I started out on the project, but I realized the reason that these projects were so successful was because of community. And so I think, and right now I'm going to start on another film that deals directly with building small communities and how that is so important to being able to interact on a larger scale in the larger community. But we have to start out small and local, and hence the name of the film, Hometown Habitat. It really has to start locally. So that's my take on it all.
Awesome. Thank you. And I hope you will, of course, let us know when that film is out. I can't wait to see it. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Naomi Edelson. I was trying to think of, she is from the National Wildlife Federation, and I was trying to think about how to describe her. Is she the parent? Is she the godmother of this whole program? But she is the person who has made it possible for us to be doing this. So I'm going to let Naomi speak for herself. Please say.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yes, I'm Naomi Edelson. I'm a wildlife biologist and I'm a senior director for wildlife partnerships at the National Wildlife Federation. I am based in Tacoma Park, Maryland, right on the border with DC, and I work in our advocacy center. So while I'm a biologist, I spend my time galvanizing people for action, just like Catherine talked about. That's my passion too. And I'm a member of a Dot Shalom Reconstructionist congregation, and my rabbi, Dobb. It was his idea to do sacred grounds, actually. So I my rabbi, and he has a big passion for the environment, and I am actually co-chair of my Green Cocoon committee at my shul. So I'm very pleased to be part of this, and I really appreciate that there's a whole movement going on now with JCAN, and that's great. I am going to share a PowerPoint, and I know some of you saw, many of you were hopefully on the first one, and this is about a program called Sacred Grounds, which is almost 10 years old, but it's still quite, still somewhat of an emerging program. We are moving it to scale, and we appreciate you being part of that. I did forget to say that I grew up in Cambridge. I grew up in Fresh Pond, and then we moved to East Lexington, right by Wilson's Farm, so I know the community well. Sacred Grounds is a program about caring for creation to help people and wildlife. We have been doing this at National Wildlife Federation since the 1970s, but only more recently have we created a program for congregations. But as I know you learned in the last one, it has, we have had a loss of huge amounts of habitat in our country, and that affects people and wildlife. And while I know most of us don't live in homes like this, I certainly don't. This is what the idea is, what people think success means. This is what people think that their lawns should look like. And one of the things we know is that not only is there destruction of habitat because of the usurping of the grounds for massive lawns, but also with the added piece exacerbated by climate change, we are really having a wildlife crisis. And we have lost so much monarch butterfly habitat. Many of you know about that. We've also lost so many of our native bees and other pollinators, and we really can do more. And it isn't just about buying land, enter parks, which are wonderful things to do, but it's about taking care of our own piece of land. And so our program, Garden for Wildlife, is really about helping people create wildlife habitat where they live, work, play, learn, and through sacred grounds, worship. We decided to do this because of the fact that congregations can often have more grounds than a home. I mean, Adat Shalom is in the suburbs and it has 5 acres. It's kind of amazing, crazy, it's a piece of land. And we can obviously reach a lot of people at once, and really honest congregations, especially their leadership, are, moral leaders in the community. Our goal is threefold: to create wildlife habitat, to prepare and cope with climate change, and also water conservation. There are 4 elements to becoming a sacred grounds, and I'm going to talk to you. I know Manya again talked to you about why, and this is going to be more of the how, but it's interwoven. And the first piece is creating wildlife habitat, which means basically digging up some of that lawn, and I'll walk through that in a minute. There's also 3 more elements: connecting faith with the environment, engaging your congregation, and then reaching beyond the congregation. Wildlife needs 4 simple things to survive: food, water, cover, and places to raise young. And that's what people do when they create certified wildlife habitat through the National Wildlife Federation. Food, we're going to hear a lot more from Neela about, so I'm not going to get into it. I'm just going to highlight it, but people think of food as usually bird feeders. The best kind of bird feeder we can do is actually create caterpillars on our property. And that's what most birds need. Caterpillars, chickadees need up to 9,000 caterpillars in a 3-week period. And we know caterpillars have co-evolved with native species. And again, Neela will tell us much more about that, especially for where you live. But we know that native plants are adapted to their local conditions and thrive well. And particularly, they have a relationship with native wildlife. And we know from work of Dr. Doug Tallamy and others that native plants are better. So the first thing is to create wildlife habitat is putting in native plants. The second thing is creating water. You can put up a simple bird bath. It could just really be a Tupperware container and just put it in your yard and let it fill with water and empty it once a week. And then you won't have issues around mosquitoes, which I know is a concern. So you could buy something pretty, but the birds don't care. Anything will do. And the last two pieces I combine, but they're really cover and places to raise young. That you need to provide, again, a lawn has nowhere to hide from a predator, and people are putting up, bird feeders, and these sharp-shinned hawks come flying in and take out the birds, or you'll have other things happen, and birds need cover from the other birds or from other kinds of wildlife. So putting in a variety of different kinds of things will help provide that needed cover. We have a wood pile in our yard, and that's a great place for wrens to hide in. And so if you do those 4 steps, you can become a certified wildlife habitat through the National Wildlife Federation website. It's self-done, it's straightforward, it's very simple. And then if you wish, you can buy a sign and share your love for wildlife with your neighbors. The other 2 parts are 3 parts to become a sacred grounds. To do more than that is to connect faith in the environment. And you can do that through a sermon, through your bima, on your bima. You could do it through, in my congregation, we had somebody walk to every single Torah class and talk about migrating birds and what they need to survive, and talk about that connected to different aspects of the Torah. It was very straightforward. Or you could use it actually as a sacred space. So it's something that is explicitly connecting faith in the environment. The next thing is to inspire and engage your members in your congregation. And again, you can do that by sharing information. You could show Catherine's film is a great way to do it. You could have somebody speak about it, or you could have planting days, and I'll show you an example of that. And the last idea is reaching beyond the congregation. And I'm going to go into much more detail because I'm doing that now with my area at home on Sligo Creek. And there's a variety of ways that you could get beyond your congregation and share this wonderful idea with others in your community, either within your faith or with other faiths or just neighbors. Here's our synagogue. Here's when Catherine actually came to film. And we had a big stormwater basin that was considered an eyesore. Here's when it filled up one day, actually, but it was this big, ugly kind of space. And we ended up putting in 2,500 native plants. And we had an amazing community engagement day where we had 60 families come out. It was really amazing to have that kind of turnout. People loved doing it. We also worked with a Baptist church in Anacostia in Washington, D.C., and they put the garden right at the front. And Kip Banks, the pastor, is actually also in Catherine's movie. And we worked with a Lutheran church where they talked about, they did in their Sunday school, they talked about it through a book, and then they gave everyone an opportunity to plant in a little planter seeds to take home and put it back at start a native plant garden at their own home. There's a nearby church in Silver Spring. They took out, again, punch of their lawn and put in native plants. And so now I'm just going to show you an example of something we're doing now, where we're working with 5 congregations to care for one particular area. So this is one idea. If your congregation wanted to do something like this, we got a grant to do this, so it definitely can cost some money, but it doesn't have to. And the idea here is to care for this beautiful local park, which is 5 minutes from my house. but it's highly polluted. It's so busy with people. It's amazing how many people use that park. And even some people are familiar with this. Congressman Jamie Raskin, who's been in the news, he loves this park. He's our congressman. He has a picture of it in his office. He loves Sligo Creek. Everyone loves Sligo Creek. So taking advantage of that, the city and the neighboring communities have tried to restore the fisheries and tried to make the creek healthier. So we are adding to that by trying to get 100 homes within this creek to plant native plants and then certify as wildlife habitat. The congregations are acting as ambassadors for caring for Sligo Creek. They're going to each be responsible for getting at least, we are actually started with 4 congregations, but a 5th one begged to be brought in. So they each only have to get about 25 homes, and they each have a green team or a sacred grounds team. We did some focus group with them to learn about messaging for their congregation. They're creating a campaign plan, and we are working with them and a lot of other partners, Interfaith Power and Light that you would be familiar with, the local friends group. And we are doing webinars for every congregation. We're doing how-to workshop for all of them together in one. We're doing native plant walking tours. We're planting at the congregation garden, and we're giving away plants. So here's a walking tour we already did recently, showing people what it's like. This is something you could do with your congregation if you know where native plants are in the area you're in. And for Mother's Day, one of the churches came up with the idea of caring for Mother Earth. They already gave away plants every Mother's Day instead of like cut flowers. And they said, oh, let's do it with native plants. What a great idea. So all the congregations are going to give away native plants for Mother's Day. And that was my yard. And so they're all working now to get people 100 homes to pledge to plant natives and to create wildlife habitat. We gave them all a pledge page, and where they can click on this link. Here's the Christ Congregational Church, and every congregation will keep track of what of their pledge. And so I'm going to ask you in a minute if you'll make a pledge. We don't have a special sign up sheet for you, but you can put your pledge in the chat that you will pledge to plant native yourself. And we're using the theme that's often used in faith of loving your neighbors is loving wildlife, and helping take care of Sligo Creek is loving your neighbor. And we're finding a terrific response. When we're doing this, they're having webinars, they're getting 50, 60 people on them, and they're getting, they're getting their number of people who are already committed just on the first webinar, even though we have all these other activities to go. Here's what it's like if you want to do it through our certified wildlife habitat program. You really can be an ambassador for wildlife. And people love beautiful plants and gardening. And I'll just end here with this beautiful little artwork I saw at a congregation in Delaware. And I think this really epitomizes why we're finding there's so much interest in this program. So that's a snapshot of sacred grounds, and we look forward to hearing more from all the other speakers, and then I'll be here for question and answer too.
I encourage everyone to take the pledge, to put something in the chat saying that you're pledging to start using native plants or start using more native plants if you already plant them. And if you have any questions about the program specifically or want more information, I will put, well, that's basically what we're here for, but I'll also put the Sacred Grounds website in the chat in just a moment. So this session is about the how and also the what. So what do you plant? What is native here in Massachusetts and in New England? And to answer that question, and very thoroughly, we are very fortunate to have botanist Neela de Zoysa, who has done a significant amount of work over the decades, both here and in other parts of the world. You may have seen her at the Native Plant Trust giving talks. We're very lucky to have her, as well as our other speakers. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Neela to answer the question, what do we plant here?
So thank you, Debbie. And thanks, Katie, for starting this group. And I want to say thank you to Naomi, and also very excited to meet Catherine. I have a little 2-second story about how I saw a hometown habitat screened at Native Plant Trust, and then brought it along to Open Spirit where Katie saw it. And here I am. I'd forgotten all about it. And 5 years later, I'm told that that was the inspiration. So thank you for being that first source of inspiration. You never know when you plant a seed how it's going to turn up. My plan is to kind of give you some guidance on choosing native plants to attract wildlife. The topic is big, so I'm hoping to provide a kind of bird's eye view and then pick a few areas to go into more detail, so you can have the breadth and the depth to give you the confidence to choose the right plants for your situation. And if you're wondering what on earth is this strange looking creature on the screen, it is the horned hickory devil, the caterpillar of the regal moth, and we will be talking a lot more about caterpillars throughout this program. So here I am back again to what Naomi was talking about and what Manya talked about 2 weeks ago. So here's our suburban landscape, highly simplified, with no food, no shelter for wildlife. And it's just a very minimalist landscape with a few ornamental trees, usually shrubs, and a large expanse of lawn. So it's kind of high maintenance, and it's an ecological desert. And I also think aesthetically it's quite boring. So it does make a difference if you plant native plants instead of lawn. Diversity of plants will bring a diversity of wildlife and create a healthy ecosystem that's pleasing to the eye. So here are some tips on how to get started. So I always like to start with a kind of bird's eye view of the location. So I've chosen the location of the Framingham Edwards Church. Edwards Church, where Katie and I have been involved in creating some gardens. So I've gone to Earth just to, frame the location. So this little dead-end street ends where the church campus is. And there's a little conservation trail here where the Sudbury River is, where the Carol Gretchel conservation trail is. So you can see there's lots of trees in that area. And the church itself is on a drumlin, and there's a sharp drop to the river. So these are kind of good overview site details to have, just to kind of eyeball your location. So then you can get into a few more details of, draw a simple plan of your property. You probably have one already with buildings and other landmarks. And then record what you see. This can be a bit of a community exercise. Is the land a hill, slope, or valley? A little bit of each. What kind of water bodies do you have on your property? What kind of plants? Are there tall trees, shrubs, and perennials? Can you identify them? Are they native, non-native? Are they invasive? And if it's the last category, you obviously want to have a plan to get rid of them. And then what kind of wildlife do you see or have you seen on your property? Butterflies, moths, caterpillars, birds, frogs, turtles, mammals. You can, make a list. And what kind of soil type, what kind of terrain, rocky, soggy, dry and sandy, and what sort of sun exposure, which that's a really important one, What kind of areas get 6 hours of direct or filtered sunlight for most of the day, what's in full shade, etc. So here are a couple of resources that Manya also put out a couple of weeks ago. So the National Wildlife Federation's Plant Finder, these little red circles are mine. So they have a couple of really neat tools where they give all the different wildlife, especially the caterpillars of the moths and butterflies related to each of these plants. And so you can plug in your zip code, and it will give you all the plants for your area. And then there's a nice little tool to make your own plant list. And then, so you can kind of have your custom list, which is a nice, neat feature that the website has. And then I also recommend the Native Plant Trust resource, Go Botany, the digital website. That's also a great one to identify your plants and get to know your plants. So if I can try this again. No, okay. So this is how I'm going to present it, just for convenience, so you can also remember, remember the contents much better. So I'm going to look at what plants are wildlife winners, and I'm going to present the plants in this order: the woody plants first, tall trees, small trees, shrubs and vines, and then I look at herbaceous plants, ground cover, and then spring, summer, and fall flowering perennials. And then I'll take a very quick look at non-flowering groups like ferns, mosses, and lichens. And then for each group, I'll highlight a couple of different wildlife that's associated with it: insects, amphibians, reptiles, birds, mammals. And then of course we are mammals too, so the community value from our point of view in terms of edibles. And then as humans, we have a unique aesthetic value. And I think for an institutional setting for institutional grounds, that's a really important thing, to have a aesthetically pleasing, orderly landscape, especially to get other people on board, because if you tell them that you're planting native plants, people think you're just going to let things go and it's going to become a jungle. So it's really important to have a nice looking landscape when you do plant the native plants. So it turns out that trees are the best for wildlife. So a lot of butterflies and moths rely largely on trees as host plants for their caterpillars and munch on the leaves, and birds and other animals then rely on the caterpillars as a key food source. I have a picture here of the Wilson's warbler, one of my favorite migrants, on a serviceberry tree. And then mammals rely on fruits, nuts, twigs, and bark, and for shelter. And trees live for decades and is a long-term investment. So because they take a long time to provide benefits, they have to be planted now for future results. So it's a long-term investment. So let's look at first the deciduous trees. Those are the trees that lose their leaves in the fall. And among them are the most important tree for wildlife. And there are many kinds of oaks, and those that grow on well-drained soils are red oak, scarlet oak, black oak, which are fast growing and can produce acorns in 20 to 25 years. White oak is slow growing, and oaks are of course majestic. They grow to 100 or more feet, providing a vertical extension of the ecosystem and a lot of beauty in foliage and winter silhouette. So if you think about that suburban lawn that Naomi was showing and I did at the beginning, and then how stubbly that grass is, okay, not more than a couple of inches tall, high, and then you think of an oak which can grow to 100 feet. So that's how tall that vertical ecosystem that we are creating if we keep the trees. So they're all different kinds of oaks, so you can choose the right oak for the right place. There's swamp white oak and pin oak, which kind of like their feet wet. They grow sometimes in inundated areas like the swamp white oak, and they also grow to be really large trees. And then there's scrub oak, dwarf chestnut oak, and bur oak, all kind of smallish. And scrub oak can even be like a shrub, just 5 to 7 feet tall, and they grow in dry, sandy soil. And they start bearing acorns really quickly. And bur oak in particular withstands really harsh conditions, and it's good for urban planting. And here on the right hand, I show this oaks, scrub oak can have beautiful fall color. Here in a natural setting of pitch pine and scrub oak, you can see the oaks in the fall that have turned color. Oops. Okay, I'm sorry. I did something to this. So let's see why oaks are the #1 wildlife plant. So oaks are host to caterpillars of 470 species of butterflies and moths, and I've just given a couple of examples here. The retarded dagger moth and the banded purple admiral butterfly. And the catkins and acorns are vital food for mammals and birds. And here you can see a gray squirrel eating catkins. In the early spring, you see lots of little oak branches scattered on the ground, and that's because the squirrels are trying to eat the catkins. The pollen is really high in proteins, and so are the acorns, because they're like nuts. They're really high in protein. So you have lots of other animals like deer, red squirrel, chipmunks, rabbits, opossums, raccoons, wild turkeys, and birds like blue jays and crows all love acorns. Birds of prey like the great horned owl and the red-tailed hawk that use tall trees with oaks for nesting and as perches as vantage spots for hunting. So just wanted to shout out Doug Tallamy's new book, The Nature of Oaks, The Rich Ecology of Our Most Essential Native Trees, is coming out next month, so keep an eye out. I'm sure it will be a fabulous book, given what he's published in the past. So let's look at one more group of trees, that's the birches. Again, lots of different birches: gray, paper, river, sweet, and yellow birch. Birch is also a real wildlife winner, and you can see here from an aesthetics point of view, they just have beautiful bark and great fall foliage, provide lots of great contrasts of color on a landscape. So birches are host to caterpillars of 400 species of butterflies and moths. I've just given one example here, the lettered Habracine moth, the caterpillar and the adult. And birds eat catkins and sapsuckers. Those are birds very closely related to the woodpeckers. They drill little holes and they lick the sap off from the trunk. Hares, beavers, and porcupines eat the bark and the twigs. So we looked at two groups of trees that lose their leaves in the fall. So let's look at a few evergreen trees. So eastern white pine, pitch pine, eastern hemlock, these are all important winter food for wildlife. So here's a eastern white pine, one of the commonest trees in our area. And this is the eastern red cedar, another hardy evergreen. It has these overlapping scale-like leaves and blue berry-like cones, juniper berries that are very popular food for birds. So evergreen conifers are host to caterpillars of almost 240 species of butterflies and moths. And here again, I've given a couple of examples of the eastern Panthea moth, the adult and the caterpillar, and eastern blue tailed butterfly. So evergreens also provide winter food for squirrels, mice, voles, and rabbits. And you can see here, red squirrels love the pine nuts. They will shred the pine cones, and you will see if you're walking in the woods next to white pines, you'll see these big piles of debris, which they call pine mittens, which is kind of the remainder of all the pine cones they've been shredding. And so you have deer mice, meadow voles, that like the smaller cones, like the hemlock cones, and hares and rabbits that eat conifer foliage. So almost 40 bird species that overwinter depend on evergreen seeds and nuts for survival. So I've given a few examples here. The cedar waxwing. There's a robin here. On an eastern red cedar, the ruffed grouse and chickadees. And then you have birds that specialize on consuming pine nuts, like the grosbeak, the pine siskin, and red crossbill. And these are actually mostly natives of the boreal forest up in the north in Canada and northern Maine, but they come down here to Massachusetts and these areas for the winter. But they're really very specialized in eating evergreen cones because that's their staple diet when they're up in the boreal forests. So the food chain then extends to depend on birds and the small rodents for survival. So you have coyotes, foxes, bobcats, owls, hawks, all these predators that then depend on the small animals, and then those small animals in turn eat the evergreen cones. So there's a whole food chain that we support when we plant the trees or plants. So let's take a look at small trees, shrubs, and vines. That's the next group, and I'll show you one group of small trees and then take a few shrubs and vines as examples. So for small tree, I chose the group, the apple family. I have a picture here of the crab apple. Let's see where I am. So there's almost 290 species of butterflies and moths dependent on the apple family, including hawthorn, cherry, beach plum, peach, etc. So apples, cherries, and hawthorns also have lots of flowers in the spring, nice splash of color after a dull winter. And then juicy berries are consumed by about 40 species of birds and mammals in early summer. So they're a really important group of small trees. Next is evergreen shrubs. I have here in the picture a great rose bay, and the pictures are from the Rhododendron State Park in New Hampshire, where the rhododendrons grow naturally under conifers, mostly white pines. And these shrubs stay evergreen, so they provide, some good color in the winter and habitat for wildlife because they provide thickets for nesting birds and shelter for small mammals. And of course, the pollinators love them when they do flower in early June. And then there are also lots of other evergreens like, the mountain laurel, the American holly, and inkberry, etc. So another evergreen shrub, which is a close relative to the eastern red cedar, is the common juniper. And this is again another hardy shrub that grows in disturbed soil, has lots of caterpillars. It's dependent on it. And again, just like the evergreen trees, berries, we talk, the common juniper also is very popular with the birds. They have these blue juniper berries, which are actually little cones. Then I have a slightly non-traditional suggestion in the buttonbush. So this is a shrub that loves water or even standing water. You find it in usually in river floodplains, and the spherical globe-like flower clusters are very popular with pollinators. And usually the thickets of underwater roots and stems are really important for turtles and frogs and other water-dwelling small fish. So that's a great plant to consider if you hadn't thought about it before. So the highbush blueberry, of course, is a familiar one. So great for pollinators, great for birds and small mammals, greatly favored by bees, particularly bumblebees that buzz pollinate the bell-shaped flowers. And they're great for us too, for berry picking. So it's a great activity to bring the community together. And then, of course, blueberries always provide great fall color. So let's look at a few vines. I've been studying vines a lot in the past couple of years, so I've been a little partial to adding a couple of extra vines here. So, of course, the honeysuckle is, everyone's favorite. And in case you weren't aware, there are lots of different honeysuckles. There's the American fly honeysuckle, the grape honeysuckle, etc. There are lots of different native honeysuckles. And again, they're host to caterpillars of 36 butterflies and moth species. You can see here the hummingbird clearwing moth caterpillar up here. And the adult is a very large moth that almost looks like a hummingbird, which is why it's called that. And then, of course, the real hummingbirds, which love the tubular red flowers and the nectar in there. So the honeysuckles also provide fruits for birds and mammals and nesting and hiding places from predators. So it's really a one-stop shop because they get their caterpillars places to all in one bar of these thickly leaved climbers. The Virginia creeper is another favorite. It's very prolific. It's easy to grow. It's a winner for great summer and fall foliage. And in the fall, the fruits show this kind of color contrast, which is called fruit flagging, to draw attention to migratory birds that tend to gorge on these fruits. So I'll end the vines with wild grapes, which are also another really important group of vines for wildlife. So fox grape is one of them, and then there's riverbank grape, summer grape. So there's several wild grapes, and they're host to about 30 different butterflies and moths of caterpillars that patronize the grapes. And about 80 species of migrating birds gorge on the fruits in the fall. So that's to late October, sometimes even early November, to fatten up for their migratory flights. And other wildlife that hibernate also tend to love the grapes because they're so high in sugar. Now, something to remember is that grapes have separate male and female vines. So here's the male flower of a male vine and a female flower with baby little grapes beginning to show. So obviously, if you're growing grapes, you have to be sure you have both kinds of vines, or at least a female grapevine, so you get the fruits. And the fox grape is a grape from which Concord grape was bred. And so the grapes are also edible to us humans, so you can make jams and jellies and use them yourself. So next, I'm going to look at the ground covers and herbaceous perennials. And once again, the lowbush blueberry, we talked about the highbush blueberry before, is another great addition to any landscape with the same benefits. You're going to get berries, lots of pollinators, and also you will get great fall color. So here's a nice little inspiration. So these are natural blueberry barren Maine. And you can recreate some of these natural vistas in your own landscapes if you can get inspiration from nature. So another great ground cover is the woodland strawberry. Again, it's very easy to grow. It spreads very quickly. It's hardy. It flowers a lot very early in the spring, particularly popular with ground dwelling bees because these strawberries are very low to the ground, and they also produce these little baby minute strawberries which are popular with the birds, and of course we can eat them too, so they're really intense in flavor. So for spring flowers, one of my favorites is marsh marigold. Here on the picture on the left, you can see it mixed with skunk cabbage in a natural setting. So early spring flowers usually that follow soon after the skunk cabbage, and usually a welcome splash of color in the spring. And then wild leek or ramp is another great one to plant. It puts out leaves first, as you see here on the left, and then flowers later towards the spring once these leaves are wilted. So you see the flowers here that kind of poke out of the leaf litter. And if you didn't know these two were connected, you wouldn't know what these flowers were because you weren't observing the leaves before. So wild leek, they just taste like spring onions or scallions, and they're again, great to, you'll see them in farm stands in the spring for sale, and they're easy to cultivate, and preferably you harvest the leaves, but leave some of the bulbs to sustain the ground cover. They are unfortunately over harvested in the wild, so you really will be doing a favor and practicing some conservation by growing them, growing these plants. So before I move on to summer flowers, I just want to make a lesser known but very important connection about spring flowers and ants. Ants are the most important dispersers of wildflower seeds. So these seeds have these little fatty little bits of tissue to attract the ants that carry it off to their nests and consume the fatty part and then abandon the seeds. So ants are a really important part of our wildlife that perform a really important function. And there are as many as 100 species of ants in New England. So it's something to contemplate. I know people don't like ants and they spray them and do all kinds of things, but every creature is really important and connected in the ecosystem, and ants play a really important role. So for summer flowers, wood lilies and Canada lilies are great choice. Lilies are best planted in open, sunny locations. They do best in moist and damp meadows, meadow-like settings, and they attract lots of butterflies and even hummingbirds. So we heard about milkweeds from Naomi, and of course we all know about milkweeds because they are the sole host for the monarch butterfly caterpillars. But there are also at least 40 other insects that use milkweed as a host plant. And there are also several species of milkweed to choose from, and all have different attributes. So the pictures here show the common milkweed, but there's also the swamp milkweed, which likes damp places, and the butterfly weed, or the butterfly milkweed, which has the bright orange flowers that like dry soil. So these plants attract a host of bees as pollinators, and milkweeds have this ingenious method where they have what you call pollinia, where all their pollen is all stuck together in these little sticky balls. And so what happens is, when the bee gets its nectar, its legs go inside this little flower, and the little pollinia gets stuck to its feet, and then they carry it off to the next flower. So here you can see, a familiar sight of the monarch caterpillar on a milkweed leaf. So fall flowers, as you know, the goldenrods kind of signify the fall. There are many species of goldenrods, and you can simply leave an area unmowed, or not mow it, and allow the goldenrods that pop up naturally to thrive. They are a pollinator feast, usually swarming with bees and other insects. There's not a kind of insect that doesn't visit the goldenrod. And this plant is also host plant for caterpillars of 135 species of butterflies and moths, and they provide great fall color and habitat for mammals and birds. So I think, if I remember, there's almost 36 different kinds of goldenrods in New England. So there's a lot to choose from. And then asters are, of course, similar to goldenrods. Also, big fall bonanza. Lots to choose from. They're hardy, they're prolific bloomers, and attract lots of late season pollinators, and then birds that feed on the caterpillars and insects. So here are my last few suggestions. So the first is ferns. So ferns are also great for ground cover. Some ferns, such as the evergreen wood fern here on the right, stays green all through the winter. So it's also great for winter color in a landscape. And then mosses are, I think, very underappreciated plants. They're green right through the winter. They can provide much needed color and are great as a lawn that absorbs moisture and doesn't need mowing. And the moist habitat created by mosses are important for frogs, salamanders, and even snails that lay eggs among the mosses. And these creatures, in turn, are important for food for other wildlife like snakes, birds, moles, and similar carnivorous animals. So lichens, there's no need to do anything, but just let them grow and observe them. I've had people say, "Oh, what are those things that grow on my trees? Is it a disease, or is it some kind of a problem?" No, they're the ancient plants that are collaboration between algae and fungi, and they give tree trunks this wonderful green glow, especially in the winter, adding to the landscape, and they are important in capturing nutrients and runoff from the tree trunks and rapidly create organic matter. So they're all different kinds of lichens, and I've just given a few here on the right hand side, so you can kind of appreciate it. So I will end with the last thought about hummingbirds and the many connections to kind of wrap up, as to, just to highlight the complexity of nature and the importance of growing native plants. So we were talking about lichens. So hummingbirds use a lot of lichens to build their nests. So here you can see a hummingbird, sitting very snugly in her lichen nest, incubating her eggs. And then when the hummingbirds migrate down south to Mexico and return, the flowers that they tend to monopolize for nectar are still not available. So they tend to use sap from remember I talked about the sapsucker in relation to birches. So they actually use the holes that the sapsuckers made, and then they lick the sap, and they sustain themselves until their favorite flowers start to bloom late spring, like the columbine. Here in the middle picture is a cardinal flower. So I'll end my talk there, and I hope I've given you some pointers just to keep you encouraged and inspired to go look for, go do more research and find plants that are right for your setting. Thank you.
Thank you, Neela. That was fantastic. And everybody else, there's a test at the end of this session. I didn't tell you that. No, I'm kidding. We've been recording this. So once the recording has been compiled and posted to YouTube, we're going to send this to you. And I'm pretty sure all of you are going to, I will tell you at the timestamp that Neela's presentation begins, because I'm sure that's what all of you are going to want to revisit. So thank you. This was awesome. I think that, and if nothing else, this showed that you have a lot of options as far as like what you can, as far as natives that you can plant even in cold New England. So I know that's a lot of information, and I wanted to next show you guys that this is something that's being done. This isn't a brand new idea. People around here have been doing it. And one place that we found was the Old Cambridge Baptist Church. That is the Reverend Betsy Sowers congregation, and one of her congregation, one of her members, Grace Peters, has been doing absolutely beautiful work for several years. Actually, I think more than a decade. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Grace and Thea so that we can see some of the things that she's been doing.
Hi, thank you. My name's Grace Peters. I'm a lapsed member of the Old Cambridge Baptist Church. I've been doing the maintenance or maintaining of the gardens at OCBC for 20 years. OCBC is the acronym for Old Cambridge Baptist Church. The subtitle for this talk is how to squeeze 20 years into 17 planting beds into 10 minutes. OCBC is located right next to Harvard University in Harvard Square in Cambridge. It's on the front and the back of the church are on two busy streets. And there's, well, I've got to get my wits about me here. I'm going to tell you a minute about the building. The building itself was erected from 1867 to 1870, and it's been listed on the National and also the State Register of Historic Places since the 1980s. There's an active congregation and also a ballet school and ballet theater. The Jose Mateo Ballet Theater is one of the principal tenants in the building. And there are also a number of social service organizations that have been using the office spaces in the basement. A lot of that's tenuous right now because of the pandemic, but usually that's a very, very busy building, and it's in a very busy location with lots of traffic, people coming and going. So this is the back of the church. Some people think it's the front of the church, but it's really the back of the church. It faces onto Mass Avenue, which is a very busy street. This photo was taken about 6 or 7 years ago. You see over on the right-hand side of the photograph, there's a large parking lot. That's part of the church property. It holds about 25 cars when it's full. And then just beyond that, there's another parking lot which belongs to our next door neighbor at the IKEA Center. When I first started working in the gardens, I had been invited by the administrative director of the Jose Mateo Ballet Theater to help put in some gardens around the property. Different people over time had attempted different things, put in little plants to beautify certain corners and spaces around the building, but there was a coherent plan of any sort. There were a few trees and a few shrubs also, but in general, around that time in the beginning of the 2000s, things were looking a bit drab. This is what the first bed, it was already there when I started working at the church, but it was one of the first attempts just before I started in making a garden and trying to improve the appearance of the outside of the building. This is the first bed that we actually worked on very much. It's on also, this is faces onto the Mass Ave side of the building. And this photo was taken about 5 years after we started planting in the garden area. We had not much, we didn't have any budget at all when we started. We got plants, perennials that were donated from various church members. I brought some things in from my home garden, and we also had a few annuals. My partner Scott was a biologist in college, and he knew a lot more about plants than I did, and he got great pleasure in dropping seeds here and there and watching to see what would happen. So we had things that were coming up as surprises and pleasant ones often. This is another area of what we had to work with on the Massachusetts Avenue side of the building. In the foreground, you see a part of the parking lot. The bed that's right next to the parking lot, originally meaning just before I started working there, was a huge pile of stones and rubble there. And Scott got some interns that were with the ballet theater to pull out the rocks and sift the soil. And then we put some more soil in there and took daylilies and hostas and stuff that were on other parts of the property and divided them and stuck them in there just to start putting in some plants and making something a little bit more attractive. Then about 8 years after we started working in the beds, the church decided to make a new entrance from the sidewalk up to the door on the Mass Avenue side of the building. And by doing that, they created 3 new planting beds, plus there was a much wider and very attractive entrance into the church door. You see here a picture of one of the 2 days that we spent planting one of the newly created beds just before the dedication of the newly created space. In the photograph, in the orange t-shirt, and I'm sitting next to him. And in the background is probably one of the little girls going into the building to a ballet class. And this is that same space at a similar perspective, taken about 7 years later. This is in the early spring. This is what we had for a handicap access ramp for a number of years. This is a shot taken from the other side of the front of the building that faces onto Harvard Street. And if you look in the picture there, you'll see that there's some asphalt that goes right up to the walls of the church building. there were a number of places where the asphalt was like that, right up to the church building. And little by little, we started removing the asphalt and putting in beds. This area, however, was in for a total renovation. It took several years to actually get all of that together. But then we had a brand new and really beautiful handicap access ramp, and also that renovation of the exterior of the building there created 3 new planting beds. So this is the handicap access ramp after it was completed. So you see we had one of the planting beds that came out of that construction work. On the other side of the handicap access ramp, one of the beds that's gets quite a lot of sun was a really good place to put some showy peonies. And we have also some catmint and a hydrangea vine that took several years to grow to that size, but it's a magnificent plant. So in the parking lot, this you see over on the bottom left is the part of the parking lot that belongs to OCBC, and on the other side of that band of plantings is the parking lot that belongs to the Ikeda Center, our next door neighbor. Originally, there was a great big ugly wooden fence in the area where that planting strip is. And it was in terrible condition around the time that I first started helping with the garden. Then about 3 or 4 years later, the Ikeda Center decided they wanted to remove the fence and they were gonna put in a plastic fence. Well, we worked with them and agreed to do a shared project, shared in the sense that they contributed half of the money to build and to put in plantings. And here is that same planted area. This picture was taken about 3 years ago. So in that area, we had an elm tree and several evergreen trees and shrubs, and some, as you can see, there's grasses, and there was a lilac tree, and in the part that you can't see that would be behind where the photographer is taking the picture, towards the end of that strip, that we had 4 different types of viburnum bushes. And on the west side of the building, you see we had a great big strip of lawn. When I first started, Scott had already put in a planting bed there. A few years before he started, there had been a mound at one end of daylilies and some irises. And then he extended the planting bed from one end to the other of the building. It was pretty long and narrow. Over time, we kept widening the planting bed and removing more of the grass. We put in more perennials and some shrubs. We had to be really careful about the shrubs that we could put there, because the pitch of the roof is such that when it snows in the winter, these humongous snow slides off the roof onto the planting beds and buries everything in feet of snow. So this is that same bed a few years later, just after we had the handicap access ramp put in. You see that we changed the configuration. There's shrubs in there. A few years before this picture was taken, I put in 5 river birch trees, and the congregation put in one bench and ballet theater put in another bench, and both of those places are wonderful spaces where people come and sit. They have coffee. The workmen that work in the dormitory next door come over there in the warm weather, and they have their coffee breaks. And parents sit there waiting for their kids to come out of the ballet classes. Students come there to read and to hang out at night. And so anyway, it attracts a lot of people. This is what happens when you let the seeds that somebody drops from their snack grow. I noticed some sunflower seeds in the bed. The kids from the ballet school often sit on the granite edges and eat their snacks or lunch. Anyway, so I saw these seeds and I thought, I'll see what happens. Pretty soon there were some sprouts, and in 8 weeks, this is what we got as a result of letting things do their thing. This is a shady part of the planting bed that faces onto Mass Avenue. And this is also that bed from the Mass Avenue you see here. In 2015, it was a very beginning to look like a pretty mature garden. We learned from the church that in the spring of 2017, they would be doing some significant masonry work on that whole side, the south side of the building, and that we would have to take down the garden so that the masons could put up their scaffolding. So in the spring of 2017, we had to cut down the really tall trees, and we made an effort to move the smaller ones and put them into a temporary bed. We moved the perennials as much as we could and gave others away. This is what part of that area looked like when the masons had finished and we were ready to bring back the plants and to put in some new things. It was heartbreaking to have to do that, but you know, it's what needed to be done for the longevity of the building. It also offered us an opportunity to rethink what to put into the bed. So I put in more some shrubs and some grasses and the perennials that we had, plus some new perennials, and then put in a whole bunch of tulip and daffodil bulbs and some allium bulbs. So in the spring of 2018, right after the masons had finished, this is what that bed looked like.
Grace, I'm sorry. We should probably move along. You have a bunch of other photos that are absolutely beautiful, and I think do a great job of showing what one person can do on a really great site. Would you mind if we shared the rest of the presentation when we share the resources, the other resources?
Sure, no, that's fine. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And I'm sorry to cut it off because I think that Grace does a really great job of showing what one kind of mastermind can accomplish over a series of years. And it's actually a story I've heard from a couple of people that I've spoken to in the last couple of weeks. And it's fantastic, it's beautiful, but it's a lot of work. And not everybody has the energy and the dedication that someone like Grace does. So if you would like to do this on your site, we can actually point you to some resources. So I'd first we're gonna hear briefly from Meadowscaping for Biodiversity, and they'll talk about the things that they're able to do. And then we're going to hear from Margaret Connors of Spirited Gardens to talk about the things that she's able to do. So Barbara, please take it away.
I'm Barbara Passero. This is Jean Devine right here next to me there. And we're from Meadowscaping for Biodiversity. This building sacred grounds and opportunity for earth stewardship, youth development, and community engagement. We work with a community. We work with, our program is to educate youth. And here we are, okay, where are we? This is Fresh Pond, right? This is Fresh Pond?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so our motto is empowering youth to heal the planet. So what we do, everything we're doing, we do with native plants. We are purists with the native plants, and because we feel that's the future of the world because of the way native plants, pollinators need native plants. So this is a church we worked in 2015. Was it 2015?
We started in
17.
2014.
2014, yeah. So this was a church in Waltham, and what we're trying to do is, this was an educational program. It's called the Youth Environmental Entrepreneurship Program, because kids learn about business, they learn about the plants, and they actually do the work of planting and maintaining the gardens. Meanwhile, they have plant sales. So some of those plants, we use some of the plants from our garden and sell them. The kids get paid, so they make money. So this was actually what I said, our dream. Our dream is to help youth, help build healthy youth development, get the community engaged due to climate change and environmental justice, and to build stewardship for the environment. So our program is God's work. We're God's work. So this is Christ Church Episcopal in Waltham. There we are in our office before the church, the garden was built. You see us on the lawn of the building. This is the minister, Sarah. What was Sarah's last name? Anyway, the minister. Yeah. So there we are. We have water barrels. We're trying to be as environmentally correct as we can. So these are some of our younger students. We built the Christ Church Episcopal Garden with, these are Boy Scouts. There's 3 Boy Scouts. One of these Boy Scouts now has his own meadow along the Charles River. This is our teacher. There's Jim, one of our workers. There's a landscape designer helped us. Here's some of our plants that we planted. That was our first meadow, and we went to a lot of places and got volunteer plants. Now here's the Christchurch Meadow after 1 year, and the kids built these stones. They love kids love paths, and this is the meadow after 2 years. So it's very beautiful. Here's a plant sale.
This is where we changed our model and tried to engage high school students, realizing that they needed to earn summer pay. So the Youth Environmental Entrepreneurship Program, where teens are guided by staff and college student mentors, they earn a salary. Barbara's talking about that, while learning how to build gardens with native plants and run a business where they would sell and install native plants. We say that the students earn, learn, and return. So just a few pictures about that experience for the high school youth. This would be examples of them learning.
Okay, so yeah. So this is Cambridge. Jean worked a group. We have groups of 10 or 12, and we work with the city, and Jean was working with the city of Cambridge. They paid for the students. They paid the students' salary to work with us to build. This is a reservoir church in Cambridge. Here's she took kids to the State House, the City Hall, where they met with one of the city councilors, and they worked, they expressed their opinions to the city councilor. What was his name, Jean?
Quentin Zondervan.
Okay, so this is along, is that Magazine Beach right there?
Yeah, removing invasive.
Okay. Yeah, removing invasive from Magazine Beach. We planted a lot along there, along the Magazine Beach, and they have people come once a month and also plant there. This is the First Parish Church in Waltham. And these are the kids and the college students that worked with us that summer. And this is right before a plant sale. This is a client that we have. We do this as a job too. So we if you need it in your church, we can do the whole project management, buy the plants. I mean, help you design the garden, buy the plants, put the plants in for you, maintain the plants. We can do the whole thing for you. It's much less complicated, of course, if we do it. You get all your choices of the plants. I guess that's.
This is the last example of how they would earn. This is a student group I had in the fall. So we don't rake away leaves from garden beds, but this was raking it from a bridge, and they painted fence in a park. This is the second part of the learn, earn, and this is the example of the return. These are some of the spaces that they photographed when they were returning to nature. The next few slides, Barbara's going to show you how we've helped some churches. Just a little contrasting.
Okay, so this is the First Parish Church in Waltham. The soil is really bad there. We still haven't gotten the soil to the right quality. This grew really slowly, but here's this year's. This is 2018, obviously, and this is 2019.
The site becomes a living lab as a way to teach students about plant and pollinator connections.
Yeah, so there's college kids here and high school kids also. They're really, really great. So this is Reservoir Church, and what the kids are doing, there's a girl watering we have watering cans, and the kids love working outside. They love getting dirty.
This is the
Well, they don't get so dirty.
And we use that church not only as a demonstration garden, but as a space where we could teach the students in an air-conditioned basement. So this is what it looked like in 2018 going into 2019. The students would also do other projects. So in this case, they made a fern garden over near the border of Cambridge and Alewife. Barbara?
So yes, so this is the garden, Temple Beth Israel in Waltham. We put in a beautiful garden there. It's really big. These are high school kids. These are high school kids here, and one college kid. There's one college kid in each place. So this is Stonehurst Estate. So what we do is we can bring the kids in, we can plan, and we do plan and help you do what you need to do to make a native plant garden. So pollinators can have a picture. Okay. So this is Jerry's Pond. Isn't this Jerry's Pond?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Jerry's Pond in Cambridge. And this was an evolving, would you explain that, Jean?
Yeah, so when we work in different communities and we arrange for the students to get pay either through the employment program of the mayor or through our fundraising. In this instance in Belmont, we found the students were incentivized to join us because they got service learning credit from their high school. So they came to help remove invasive plants that are all over the parking lot and the back woods of the Belmont Women's Club, and then they planted native plants in the front garden that had been donated by members of the garden club, members of the women's club, and us. But they also learned. So this is just an example of understanding habitat connections. So this year we tried this service learning model as a way. We work with the students throughout the year. We do climate cafes and things like that. And coming soon is a brand new program where we're partnering with the Waltham Black Future Fund to tailor our curriculum to teach them all about ecosystems gardening, business principles, but also how they can have agency in environmental justice. It's been obviously a big topic. So we're just launching that program.
So if we just put
yeah.
We just put out a newsletter for January. If anybody would like a copy of that newsletter, it explains a lot of what we have done over the last year. This is a picture. This is Joy's Pond too. I mean,
yes, but this, what you should consider, and I know that Naomi started with this, is after you build it, use signage to educate people what's going on there and provide. This was a temporary sign, but we've made this sign so people that this planter happens to be along a bike path, so a lot of people go by going, what's going on there? So if you have something like this as well, Naomi, in our last presentation, we have habitat certification at 3 of our sites, so we would have that as well. But this explains a little bit of what's going on. This is something that we had for the our first project was right next to a bus station, and people were coming by all the time wondering what was going on there. This is another example that was at the Reservoir Church. So we've just had some experience doing it, and we'd love to help you think your way through it if you want, especially to engage youth in the experience project-based learning. They get very proud for what they have contributed to making this habitat. So,
and we call it it's called functional gardening because Doug Tallamy told us to make a clamor, and we make a clamor for functional gardening because it's gardening for life.
Thank you, Jean and Barbara. That was awesome. And I hope everyone, I will be happy. I think I have the newsletter, but if you guys can resend it to me, then I will, or a link to it, I will make that available for everyone because these guys really do great inspirational work. The last person I wanted to hear from tonight was Margaret Connors of Spirited Gardens. And she is actually a friend of mine, and she is the person who inspired me about 15 years ago to start looking into this work in the first place. So she also has a social justice slant to the work that she does, but at a slightly different angle. So I'm going to turn it over to Margaret, and we will click through her presentation.
Hi there. This is, Spirited Gardens logo, which is done by a friend of mine last year. The company is 3 years new. We work in Boston. It's a team of 4 of us now. This is a picture of, and that's Jamaica Plain. Some of the team members, Sabrina, many of the team members are from the Urban Farming Institute and City Growers, which I co-created. A number of the team members now have started their own businesses in the last couple of years. I need to change that up because, I need people who want to stick around rather than, being inspired, in the work to be entrepreneurial themselves. This is Brandon, who, daylights as a gardener and nightlights as a hip hop artist in Boston. During the pandemic, at the beginning, landscapers were not considered essential. So I had to quickly come up with some ideas for basically doing, including agriculture as a part of Spirited Gardens. So we put in these beds that you could grow food within your perennial garden space. So really, we're invested in the ability of humans to restore and the earth to regenerate, and I really like that. Those two words, restoration and regeneration as our vision for the urban landscape. We dig out invasive plants. So this is black swallowwort. We don't just pull it, and we educate, homeowners and, our staff about doing exactly that. You know, not all native plants can be planted. You know, this is a beautiful native plant that, you know, really just grows where it is found, and even though we focus on native plants, not all of them can be transplanted. Speaking of transplanting, we do a lot of guerrilla transplanting. I don't know if you've heard the word guerrilla gardening, but we take, you know, people want to change things up and, you know, add more natives, or, you know, add certain things. And what we'll do is we'll move plants that are native plants and trees to other locations in the heart of the city. This is just, all these photos here are just sort of inspiration for, you know, what we want to do in the urban landscape. This is a shot I took in the Arboretum. The other one was at a community garden. Just, you know, just always, I'm always inspired by, you know, the inspiration of nature. This is my own garden in front, you know, with just blueberries and oaks, you know, white oak. Another gorgeous shot of, like, nobody created this, nature did, you know, and that's what I'm inspired by. These are asters that have gone to seed, and they actually are beautiful, even though they've passed. And they also are, when the snow falls on them, you know, another flower is created. And then, of course, you know, we acknowledge and teach about all the species that are in the leaves, are in the trees, are in the native plants, you know, that use them for food and etc. You know, we garden in a city, you know, that's my business. 50% of the world's population live in cities, and it's really an area that really has been not paid attention to. And so we're starting here, you know, because the heat islands of climate change, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, someone said 80%. Okay. Yeah. You know, climate change is changing things very quickly. And, you know, we want to have some resilience in urban areas because so many people actually do live in them. So we're doing you know, we're inventing as we go, as they say.
I am a city dweller as well, and yes, trust me, when you live in a city, you love your green spaces more than anybody can imagine. So, you know, we want to green Boston as much as we can. We're very fortunate that we live in one of the greener cities in the country, but we can do much better. I wanted to thank everyone for coming. I wanted to thank you guys for staying a little late. My apologies for that. We have some next steps listed. Please visit the Sacred Grounds certification site. Just go to sacredgroundsnwf.org/sacred grounds and join the new group that formed. I am putting my email once again for like the third time tonight, but you know, you guys don't have it memorized yet. So there you go. So please email me and I will be happy to add you to the group. I think I have to do that manually. My goal is to help foster a sense of community until we figure out a better way to do that. And I heard that Sacred Grounds is going to be coming up with their own forum soon. And as soon as that's ready, I'm sending all of you there. But thank you guys so much. Look out for emails from us in the next couple of days. We will send you a video link to this. Also wanted to thank Thea, who has been our tech goddess tonight and all nights, and we literally could not have done this without her. So please email me. I will send you everybody else's email. And with that, good night.
Good night.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. It was
Thanks,
really nice to
Deb.
see you all of you.
Wonderful. I learned so
Thank
much.
you.
Everybody, that was really cool.
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming.